Good evening, everyone. It's 6 p.m., Wednesday, September 27th, 2023. This is the Board of Commissioners' regular workshop meeting. City Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Bostic,
Present.
Vice Mayor Kerr,
Here.
Commissioner McGeehan,
Here.
Commissioner Brooks. Here. All are present. Commissioner Taglerini is absent.
Thank you. Public comment. Is there any public comment on any items that aren't on the agenda? Please come forward. Love to hear from you. Okay, no public comment. First item up is FY24 Pinellas County Sheriff's Office contract for law enforcement services. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commission. Robin Gomez, City Manager. And my apologies, this item should have been at a prior meeting as we're approaching the end of the fiscal year, but there's really no significant changes in the level of service. The City of Madeira Beach, like a few other cities in Pinellas County, we contract with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office to serve as our law enforcement here in the city, which involves the full services that the sheriff provides, from patrol to investigations to all the special services such as if you ever need the SWAT or any of the heavy equipment, the K-9, the helicopter, all those specialty type of services. They also provide us with the community code enforcement, community policing that's embedded into the patrol. So that's who we have contracted for many years here in Madeira Beach. And the item before you is the agreement, which again, no significant difference in the level of service. As with any type of service in our world, there are cost increases from year to year. So the agreement does reflect a 7% increase over the prior year, almost 8%, excuse me, from 1.459 million to just over 1.575 million. And again, the increase is mainly due to costs of labor, equipment, prices going up, and just as inflation has impacted all of us, also the sheriff has to provide for those increases. I did mention one service that is provided, also school crossing guards that are used primarily on 150th and Dumay Road for the Clearwater Fundamental School, the Madeira Beach Fundamental School. So the increases, again, are included a brief summary of it, mainly, again, related to labor and equipment, and a little bit in the supervision. No change in personnel. Still, we are provided 2 deputies at all times. There's a corporal and a sergeant on duty as well, and a lieutenant that's available, I think, primarily during the day part of the shifts. The deputies do work 12-hour shifts for the patrol. Our code enforcement and community policing deputies, there are 2, as I stated, that are assigned to the city. They work 4 10-hour days, one deputy Monday to Thursday, the other from Wednesday through Saturday. So they're here 6 days of the week for, again, the code enforcement, community policing, interacting with residents, with businesses, really being kind of the face of law enforcement and really a great point of contact with our residents, businesses, and even visitors. In the time that I've been here, I have learned a great deal about what the sheriff's office does, a lot more than at a previous city up the road that had its own police department. And I am extremely impressed with their professionalism, with the type of work that they do, how they do it, their interaction with residents and businesses, and am totally supportive of the work that they do. I've had a chance to meet a lot of deputies in special events. For example, we do have a kind of a crew that comes out. They bring the mobile command unit for our seafood festival in January. But very impressed with all the deputies that I've met. We have utilized additional deputies during our peak time of the year, during our spring break time in March and April, which were really beneficial. It really provided proactive patrols and alleviated some issues that we had in prior years with some vandalism and kids just kind of being kids. And So we really do appreciate all of that work. With us tonight, out here in the audience, is Captain Mike Liner, who oversees our agreement. If Mike, you just want to introduce you, because I don't believe we have mayor and, which I think you know, but two new commissioners that you may have recently met.
Hello. As Mr. Gomez says, I'm Mike Liner. I'm the captain. I work as a liaison for our Central District Station, which is south of Galta Bay and the cities that contract. So there's 10 cities, Madeira Beach obviously being one of them, that I liaison with, as well as my duties with the schools and stuff that doesn't keep me too busy. But anyways, I know Mr. Mayor, there's a couple of you new ones, so it's always nice to meet everybody and stuff like that. Typically, when I come back and pass it, I would come down here when you talk about the contract. So if you had any questions that I could answer on behalf of the sheriff. But I can tell you, we've had, I think I've been in this position since 2015. We've always had a really good working relationship with Madeira Beach, which I like. So I'm just, in essence, here to answer if you have any questions.
No real questions here. I see it as a win-win. I mean, we have all the resources that are available from Pinellas County as needed, like city manager was suggesting, when you need a little extra help in the heavy season, you're there. It's almost like a union hall. We have our regulars, but then we can always go to the hall for a few extras when we need them. I think it's great. You can expect the cost of living adjustments and equipment. You can expect that to go up 7.9%. Seems realistic. No, I think it's a great relationship, and always get great feedback from your deputies.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would agree. All of my interactions with the deputies have always been very positive, and I rarely pull out of my house that there's not one sitting near it, so good work. Thank you very much.
Very good. I'll pass that along. Thank you.
Yes, I have no questions either. Just thank you for your service and your fellow deputies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, whatever we need, you can supply. You have air support, marine support. So it's a great relationship. Thank you.
I appreciate that. I really do enjoy coming. I really enjoy working with the city and stuff like, and Mr. Gomez. I went back when I first got here, was when Shane was here. So I've worked with several managers, and especially, I've been very impressed. I've been told Mr. Gomez this, but I think you guys are all in good hands. So it's always nice when you get along and everything works. So I'm glad to hear, because occasionally, obviously, we hear you about experience, to which we're a professional organization. We will take care of that. We don't have 100% all the time, but we strive for that. So I do enjoy our relationship down here. I wanted to thank you all.
Thank you for coming,
All right, Mayor.
Captain.
Thank you.
And then Mayor and Commission, at the October 11th meeting, then we will bring back the agreement for a vote to adopt. It is in our fiscal '24 budget that we just approved it a few minutes ago, so it's in the budget for next year. And thank you.
All right. Well, next up, we had to push this in here. Special Magistrate lien on 15350 Gulf Boulevard. Is there anyone in the audience that wanted to speak on this? Okay. Please jump in.
First of all, I appreciate you allowing me to add this to the agenda. I wanted to take a few minutes of your time to discuss the topic with regard to this property. The property I'm talking about is 15350 Gulf Boulevard. This property is owned by Victoria Cardona. As some background, this is a code enforcement case that came to code enforcement in November of 2018 on a complaint that the property was not being maintained. Specifically, there were exterior beams that were damaged. There was a broken sliding glass window, a caved-in garage ceiling in the home. As a direct result of that, there was a special magistrate hearing. Testimony was received, and the special magistrate did in fact find a violation of the cited code section, which is section 14-669, that's maintenance of exterior premises, and also section 14-70, which is general maintenance. At the time the order was entered, the property owner was given until May 22nd, 2019, to come into compliance. So there was a significant period of time for her to come into compliance. If she failed to do so, that the order read that she would be fined $250 a day for every day that the fine continued to run because of noncompliance. Subsequent to that, there was little or no activity on the property. There had been, for almost 5 years, there has been no repair of those cited items back in 2018. There are some photographs that I included in the packet, which city staff obtained, so that you could actually see the actual damage. As we were receiving complaints in February, the city manager asked me to issue a demand letter to Ms. Cardona to obtain compliance on the property, or come to the point where we're going to be here at this meeting where we're asking for additional authorization. As a direct result of that letter that I sent Ms. Cardona, she did reach out, she did speak to the city manager, and the city manager did allow her until July 31st, in other words, almost 5 months, to get the property into compliance. She failed to do anything in those 5 months. I've included in the packet the email exchange that I've had with her over the past several months trying to get compliance. And although there has been a lot of promises, there has been no action. So I'm still receiving more complaints. I frankly have received several phone calls from neighboring property owners complaining about this taking so long to get it fixed, and I was told that 6 or 8 of them were going to be here tonight to discuss this issue. I don't see anybody in the audience that's stepping up, but since there has been no work done on the property, I'm asking for your authority, and we'll do that at a regular meeting, by the way. So this is just kind of to answer your questions and try to bring it to a head. We're going to be asking for authorization to file a complaint for injunctive relief in the circuit court. So let me explain what that basically is. We'll be filing a complaint. It will be served upon the property owner. And in the complaint, we're asking the judge to enter what's called a mandatory injunction. In other words, tell the property owner that she's got to get this work done. The judge normally will, if we're successful, order her to do it within a certain period of time, and if she fails to do it, then there could be sanctions. And the sanctions could be far-ranging from additional fines, authorization for the city to do the work if the city wanted to do the work, any other thing that would be a possible solution that she may bring to the table. I'm not sure what that would be right now, but the court would give her time to do that. I've done this a number of times in different cities. When we get to a point where 4 or 5 years of noncompliance and code enforcement actions, it's not an easy thing to do to file a lawsuit against a resident. But this building is in a state of disrepair and something needs to be done, and this is kind of the last resort. So I'll be asking for your authority to actually file the complaint for injunctive relief at the October 11th meeting, the regular meeting, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have tonight. In the packet, in addition to the email exchanges that we've had, the photographs, the special magistrate's order, there is also a memo that was prepared by the building department setting forth the specific issues. And let me just read those out loud to you. So I'm reading from the August 17th memo from the building official. In order to bring the property into compliance, the following must be completed. The balcony stucco, soffit, and fascia must be repaired and or replaced. And there's a photograph number 1. The broken sliding glass door must be repaired and or replaced. There was also photograph 2. The garage ceiling needs to be repaired and or replaced, and that was photograph number 3. He also says that it's critical that these life safety concerns be addressed as soon as possible to prevent further falling debris on the exterior and interior of the structure and the adjoining property. So the building official and city staff is recommending the filing of the complaint from injunctive relief, and that's why I'm here today. I did want to let you know that at 5:31 this evening, just before the meeting, I did get the following email from Ms. Cardona. She's responding to my email of almost a month ago. Hello, Mr. Trask. My sincere apologies for not having gotten these repairs completed by the agreed-upon time frame. This is of utmost priority for me, and I am still hyper-focused on getting the work done as soon as possible. Thank you. And it's signed by the property owner. That's the same type of email that I've gotten a number of occasions and that you saw in the email chains that I had sent you. She's well-intentioned, but she's not getting the work done. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a few. Is the property current vacant or is it occupied?
It is occupied by the property owner,
It is.
yes.
Are there life safety issues that would red flag the property and evict the person?
So it's not gotten to the point where the building official has taken that position. He realizes that there are life safety issues, but they've not gotten to the point where he was going to issue that type of order. It could be, and it could be much worse, but we can't get into the property to inspect it. So I only have the photographs and the information based upon when we were in it the last time. So
Okay. And then have they been fined per day so far? And then what is that total number?
it's $250 a day since May 22nd, 2019.
Oh, my.
It's a lot of money. It's probably way more than what the unit is valued at. But once the property is brought into compliance, that fine would stop, and the property owner could come into agreement with the city as to a fine reduction or some reduced fine amount. That could be some part of the discussion, but right now, the goal is to get compliance. And it's my understanding that the owner is sight impaired, and that is one of the issues in dealing with the repairs.
All right, thank you. Commissioners?
Based on the mayor's question and your answer, I would find that this, if we didn't give you authority to file a complaint, that we could be setting ourselves up for liability.
I'm not so much concerned about that. There are lots of properties in the city and in other cities in Florida that have running fines that get really, really high. It doesn't mean that we have to take any additional action. What I'm concerned about is taking the action because these are joined units. There are, I think, 4 units in this building, and so one starts to fail, and then it's going to be a domino effect on the other units. So, and if there's black mold involved, and if you can see that photograph about where the garage ceiling fell in, that, I'm not an expert on black mold, but it looks like black mold. And so, that needs to be addressed.
I'd suggest it's been 1 month shy of 5 years,
Yeah.
that we'd be negligent not to give you authority to move forward, file a complaint.
Yeah, I believe we also have to worry about possibly possums, raccoons, rats, snakes. This looks like a perfect home for them, We have to worry about the neighbors that they live next to. And especially, you mentioned the black mold. That could possibly be very hazardous to children. Is this secure at all? Is this garage door open all the time?
No, it is not open. It is, from every time that I've seen it, it's been closed.
Oh.
So it was opened when there was an inspection done back in 2018.
Okay, thank you.
So it's her homesteaded property, right? Has she ever been into the city to try to have some conversations, Robin?
We spoke with her several months ago, and with a neighbor, and the neighbor even offered to help, and they were getting ready to do that, but then the neighbor called and said she did not want the help. But she pretty much assured us that she would get it corrected, but just as Mr. Trask explained in the email exchanges, but to date, nothing has been done.
I agree with Vice Mayor Kerr. I don't see how we don't do something, take a step forward.
Is
Right?
she claiming financial hardship?
No, not in any of the emails that I've seen. I don't know if, when you talked to her,
No, it was never brought, it wasn't brought up, so.
I would suggest that at the next meeting, we give you authority, vote on that.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, next item up is, let's see, Madeira Beach Market Agreement. We have anybody from the audience that needs to speak on this? Okay, Jay? Thank you.
All right, good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. This contract is for the Tampa Bay Markets Wednesday morning market on Madeira Way. We've worked with them for the past, I can't remember, 4 or 5 years. I've had no issues with them. We're just looking to lock something down. They had some issues north of us with their contract, so we wanted to make sure that we got something taken care of here. As far as we've known and been working with them, everybody along Madeira Way has been happy with them. We did have the minor issue with the road this past year, which is why we added the caveat to the market that should anything take place along that street or cause an issue or disruption, that we would work with them to find an alternative location. So basically just looking to secure the market in their future. I put a suggestion in there for 5 years, and then that way it's something they can plan and know that there's a future, and that really helps with lining up vendors and all sorts of other things related to what they do. So pretty simple, and if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Is there any major changes to what you've been working with in the last 5 years,
Nope.
other than that?
So for us, we simply drop off cones in the morning and pick them up in the afternoon.
Right.
They provide their insurance, they provide the vendors, they provide all the entertainment, so they
Has
take
it-
care of
has this,
everything.
Has this facilitator, I don't know the correct term, have they always been the one that's done this? Because I remember back in 2008, we used to visit from the Reddingtons, and that was just a staple on Wednesdays, even at that time.
So in my time, in the 9 years I've been here, we've had 3 different ones. I forget the name. I remember Laura was her name, but I forget the name of their organization. And things were fine with her, and then for whatever reason, the city got away from the market. And then when we got back into it, the rec department actually ran it. That was nothing short of a nightmare. It was successful. It was just a lot more work. It's better specialized for someone that's in that industry and has those relationships. And then we've had her since then. They approached us on it, and it's been great.
Yeah, no, I think it's a big part of who we are, so.
I would add in the agreement, we are, in essence, recovering our costs that Jay said for setting up in the morning and closing the road and reopening, so at $50 per market day, and then they are required to provide a $1,000 kind of damage deposit. I don't believe we were doing that in the past. So that's really the main, well, and the fact that we have an agreement we're bringing to you for approval to continue to, in essence, lease that section of Madeira Way every Wednesday from 6 a.m. to approximately 3 p.m. for the road closure, or 7 to 3, 7 to 2:30. And the market runs, Jay, from November.
It's December 1st through, and I've got
December
to
1st.
change that, December 1st through
Right before Memorial
May, I
Day.
believe May, yeah, through the end of May. So they've got it dialed in. They know when people, just like we know, and the streets start filling up, so do the markets. So they do what they do.
I think it's great.
I agree, I like the market,
Great.
I also agree.
yeah.
Still dog friendly also, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, they are.
Great job, Jai.
Thanks.
All right. Next up is Recreation Center Solar, RFP.
Alrighty, so the background on this, in January of 2022, the Board of Commissioners at the time was talking about solar projects throughout the city. We were approached by a third party about this building, the rec center, and the fire station. At the time, the board decided that the rec center would be the, I guess, test project for this. It was a project that we took on. So we worked with Wilson Gentry engineering firm to obtain some drawings and plans for the roof of the rec center. And essentially, looking at the potential of putting the proposed project out for RFP to get official pricing on it. The first time we went around, it was in the $95,000 range. We've got $100,000 budgeted for it next year. Solar's gotten cheaper, but everything else has gotten more expensive, so we're kind of ballparking there. The one, if you see in the fiscal impact portion of this, the one thing that I am hoping to utilize is we have $383,544 in BP oil spill funds that we've held on because it just hasn't been expended at this point. So to me, the idea of spending oil money on solar energy is entertaining at the very least, but it's an opportunity I think that we could, get the rec center set up for the future. And, we did the lights first, and we've seen a 40% decrease on our electric just on the ball field lights. That's probably more than that. I've got a spreadsheet for that, but this is another opportunity for us to look at reducing our energy footprint at the rec center as well. So, so with these drawings, we were just going to put out for RFP, get some pricing, and see where that puts us. And then after that, we could look to move forward or shelve it, depending on where that ends up. So, just wanted to get some feedback from the group before I got into the enjoyable RFP process of putting all the information together and soliciting and doing all that stuff. So, get y'all's feedback.
I think it's an excellent idea. Do you have some numbers to go by for how many panels, how much electricity it's going to generate, and then how we're going to recoup our money, or how many years it is going to take to recoup the money for the installation?
So this proposed is 110 panels,
Okay.
which is a pretty significant size system. And their simulation says 72,920 kilowatt hours.
Okay.
I know that when we began this project, we took the previous 3 years of Duke Energy bills from the Recreation Center and sent it to them. So they utilize that to multiply everything together and how much energy do we need to produce based on the roof space and everything else. From the aerial site that they provided, you can see that not the entire roof is utilized. So at this point, the assumption is that this should put us at even. It's going to generate, obviously this morning it would have been great, but all the rest of the day it was awesome. And it's just something we'll have to see. And I know that the rising cost of energy, especially, alone, is. But we can look when we go to do all this stuff. We'll know. We'll do the calculations and everything, and that's what I want to find the prices, and then we can work with that group as well to do kind of a cost projection of what electric would be versus what this overall would be. So I had to do this personally at my house, so I'm interested to see how this works for a system that will actually cover all of the electric, and at least that's the goal. So
Okay, it sounds like we still have some questions here.
we do, for sure, yeah.
Have we contacted the state or the county to see if there's, or even federal for grants? You're inundated with advertisements residentially that Florida will give you solar panels.
So most of what we've seen in our research is that it's a tax break, which doesn't help us. And because they've renewed the solar tax break, and I think it's 30% of the cost comes back to you, but you get a tax credit for it when you fill out your taxes. So we'll continue to research in the process, but I haven't had any luck finding anything like that. I was hoping even, to throw Chief in this, but even hopefully there's a training grant of some kind, because now they're going to houses with solar panels on the roof and all that stuff. So we've been trying to get creative and searching and finding stuff like that, but just haven't had any luck as of yet, but we'll continue to do so.
Good. How about our lobbyist? I mean, Is this on his list as well?
Yeah, there's several that I will, and he'll be here at the October workshop, but I'll start to provide you some notes. They're really working on the resiliency and storm preparations and hardening your infrastructure. And so solar panels are not quite at the top of the list.
How about Duke Energy?
Duke Energy's, the only successful program I've seen is some combination of leasing the roof space to them, so then they own the system and the perpetual rights to them.
No.
Yeah.
No, no, I don't think that's a good idea. No, keep moving forward. I mean, it's definitely a win, I think. I would be interested to find out what the ROI is on that type of system, and is it at 100%, or is it designed at 110 or at 90, or, you know, where'd they come up with that number of panels? I would imagine you could look back on your usage over the last few years and kind of get an idea, especially since you changed the lights out on the ball fields to LED. So, and any power that's created, maintained in the batteries, because can it be used in any other part of the complex here? Or is it strictly the ball field and the rec center, and there's no real tie?
So this
Yeah,
design itself doesn't have battery. Florida uses the net
feed-
metering
feeds
system.
back,
So we would
okay.
just feed back and gain credits for that. And
But,
luckily,
but in that vein, we'd get credits
correct.
if you have more blank space here to fill. We'd get credits that would offset some of our energy costs throughout in this building.
I'll have to look into that a little bit more too. I know that Duke isn't entirely keen on producing too much back into the system. So it's, a lot of the systems, it's build on your roof what is sufficient for your facility.
Right.
Because then at that point, we'd kind of turn into an energy provider rather than just a customer, and it's a weird gray area. But again, what we
It's
can
all the
look,
same bill, isn't it?
yeah.
It all comes from the same checkbook.
Yes. Yeah, we're really looking for this really to feed the facility. It does get significantly more expensive to try to connect the greater the distance.
No, I get that, but I'm just wondering, all right, you're feeding back. Like I say, it's the same account.
Right.
So you started the presentation that we were going to start this as a first step to see if it's feasible and see how we liked it. If we wanted to consider this building, what's the difference if we consider this building or if we put additional panels on that building?
Well, so the challenge, each of these buildings, so the city hall, the concession stand, the lights, I want to say the event power as well as the rec center are all metered separately. It's the same account, but separate meters.
Oh, okay.
And I think if I had to guess, I think there's a percentage they want you to
Well,
stay within on the metering.
it sounds like you still need to ask a lot of
Right.
questions.
I agree, yeah.
And Chiquita can probably assist on that. That's all I have.
So Robin, have we looked at the Florida League of Cities grant portal to see if
Yeah.
there's any money there?
They do, it's a little complicated because they're looking really for a multi-structure usage, whereas we're looking, which eventually we will, but we're kind of, as Jay stated, let's focus and see how this works out and then expand to the others, but we will, they had a couple in there regarding some assistance, but, and we'll continue to see whether we can, if we were to, the next phase probably look to do multiple structures, because they're not going to be as large, likely as many panels as what we're looking to add at the rec center.
Okay, thank you.
So far, I think it's a great idea.
All good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next up is the Clearing Consultant Agreement, FY 2024.
So Mayor and Commission, this is discussion more, I know the item says a Clarion, but really to provide an update on the finance director, city treasurer position. This came out of the one-on-one meetings that I've had with you, and really the question was where we heard back from the state, specifically the Attorney General for the letter that Mr. Trask wrote, and I think we have not received any response from the Attorney General on the request.
We have not received an opinion back yet.
And so therefore, really to have a discussion if, whether to, kind of your direction a little bit of how to wait to receive that, which was really kind of, well, what I gathered from the prior discussion, and then from prior discussions, how, to proceed. I had stated really the feel for this position, or the need, was really as a part-time, which in essence is the agreement that we currently have with a Clarion for Mr. Laughlin's services here. He did prepare an agreement for next year solely because the agreement expires on September 30th. It's an October 1 to September 30th, but it just automatically extends. It gives either side a 30-day termination notice if we need at such time we need to do that. Again, I'll just reiterate that from my perspective, I think really this agreement works. It's functional. We're waiting to hear, again, from the Attorney General for them to opine on the process relative to the language in our charter. But if at some point we choose to proceed to make another appointment, if you were to decide or to provide direction on a full-time position, then that's something I would advertise to hire a full-time with full-time salary, benefits, et cetera, which, as I've said before, salary would likely be, the way things have been going in the last few months, somewhere in the 140,000 amount for a full-time salary, plus benefits. We're looking at a total cost of about 175,000 for if we had a full-time finance director, city treasurer. The current agreement with a Clarion is at $7,400 a month, and the proposed increase is to $7,800 a month for the services that we receive, which again is a lot less than a full-time position. But so really just to get any additional comments that you may have and what direction to proceed. Just to remind you, in the city's charter, the language is that the city manager appoints a finance director, city treasurer, and the city commission approves or confirms that appointment.
Comments?
So you're talking about a full-time employee, which we don't need, is my understanding. When we don't need someone in that position 40 hours a week, am I correct?
Yes. And we do have a full-time staff of 3 full-time positions: an assistant director, an accountant, and a payroll benefits payroll benefits coordinator.
Which they manage the day-to-days.
Yes.
And our current situation is just overseeing and doing a higher level of work.
Yes. Yeah, related mainly to the majority of the work with the budget.
Right.
The year-end external audit.
Personally, I think we should continue with the month-to-month, and I think we should, now, the vote was for a full-time finance director. That's the way it was written, is that correct? Or was just an in-house employee finance director?
It wasn't written as full-time, which is what has been confusing to me, that we went from changing the language so that it was more specific in having someone as a subcontractor to now when anyone comes and speaks, it's full-time, and it was never about
Correct.
full-time ever.
So the full-time was never
Was
part of it.
never part of, that was not part of what
Right.
was voted on. It wasn't part of the change of the ordinance. It wasn't
Yeah, the charter
the
amendment.
charter, sorry.
Right. The only,
Yeah, it was never full-time.
no, and my communication of a full-time was that it not needed, not necessary, and also I just provided you, if the decision was to go with the full-time, here's what the salary would be. And in the agenda item, there are some comparisons of other jurisdictions and what their costs are for a full-time finance director.
I appreciate you doing all that work and putting that together. I'd like to see a parallel path where we have a part-time 20-hour minimum. I don't know if you have to put it that way. RFP or maybe with some of the other cities, the beach communities, that they may have a finance director, but they're not in need of a finance director full-time, or that we, at least when we make a vote, we know what we're voting on a decision to go one way or to go another way. If we don't get any responses on a part-time finance director, then that kind of answers a lot of the question right there.
So the main concern that would come to mind based on history of just being here and conversations from residents who've been here for a long time is that we have a really good finance director now, and in the past, we've had really bad finance directors. So where concern would come up in my thoughts would be, we were going to wait for the decision from the state before we made a decision to do anything different. We know that we do not need a full-time person here. We know that we have a finance director who's doing a very good job by all information. I would not want to get us in a position where we ended up taking somebody just because we could get them as an employee.
I would agree.
And end up having a
I would
bad-
agree 100%,
yeah.
and I would suggest that.
So we don't
that-
hire the
I mean,
finance director, though, Robin does.
Right, so
Yeah.
I would suggest that Andrew also, if it's, okay with him, if we need to comply, if this comes back from the Attorney General and they don't agree with Tom's assessment, and they suggest that we need a finance director as an employee, then at least you have some flexibility and you're getting ahead of that decision by seeing who else with the experience, with the accreditation, that could fit that. And you speak with Andrew to see if that's something that he's interested other than through his company to do it personally. And that you have a little bit more to make that your decision on who you would be recommending. Because we're not going to debate that. It's not like with the attorneys choosing an attorney, that the board doesn't debate and go back and forth and interview. Am I correct on that?
I'll go ahead and read this section of the charter. It says, "There shall be a director of finance who in turn shall be the city treasurer. The director of finance shall be appointed by the city manager, subject to the Board of Commissioners' approval." So that's really the direction. So he would bring it to you, and you would either up or down it, kind of thing. So I agree with your assessment. There would not be that back and forth.
but at least we'd have an opportunity. I don't even know how to put it out. Do you put it out as an RFP? Do you put it out as an RFQ? Do you just call some of the?
How do you do
I
that?
don't know how the process, but I think you need to have more pebbles in your bag to
Sure. No, I
to
do.
choose from to make
Sure.
sure that this is the right decision. I'm not, the same way we went through the attorney process. I'm not an advocate for or against who we have. We just want to make sure that we try to comply and make sure we make our best decisions, just like you do in your life at home.
So I think my question would be, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but my question to that, in going out and looking for people to come and apply for the job, is if we're going to look, we have a finance director that is doing a good job. We wouldn't fire him. So why would we look for another finance director to apply for the job unless he says, I don't want it? Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, it would be like, Robin does a great job. We're not going to go look for a new city manager when his contract comes up, right? It's, why would we go look if we're happy? That would be my.
Robin's not getting out of here.
I know. But I mean, that would be my thought. So I follow what you're saying and being prepared, but being prepared in understanding where Andrew stands, if when that letter comes in, it says something different than what's anticipated. And
I'm just trying to get ahead of the game here.
I totally
because-
understand, and I agree with you.
Yeah, there's a possibility of just getting some feelers and, have, just leave it open, but,
I
yeah,
mean,
it's difficult.
You
'cause
have an ongoing dialogue with the other,
Yes,
with
yeah.
the mayors up and down the beaches. And like I say, I don't know if we put out a formal RFP
Yeah, I
and
don't-
say this is what we're looking for, but we don't have to select anyone. I don't know the answer. I'm just throwing up.
Come up with something. Yeah, because it is a little awkward if you're not procuring a good or a service.
Right.
It's actually somebody, a body that will be in there, so.
Right, and then what are the requirements? 5 years, you need to have certain certifications.
Yeah, there's something.
You have to have experience with, I can't tell you
Yeah,
everything
part of the
that Andrew does,
qualifications.
what reports he has to generate that we never see for the state or for the county, and what relationship he has to have with, different agencies, and I wouldn't begin to know what that is. And like we talked about, all the day-to-day, the day-to-day journal entries, that's, whether it's employee compensation, or that's part of the software that the city uses. So I don't have the answers. I'm throwing out some questions.
So I mean, if we're just throwing stuff out there, I stand by what I said earlier, and I've said it in other meetings. If we want to see where we stand, why aren't we just asking Robin to have that conversation with Andrew and see whether or not we have an employee, if indeed that is what ends up needing to be?
Well, I think we are, but I think we're also expanding that to say, check your other avenues as well, and make sure you bring back a recommendation. The recommendation may be to stay with a Clarion versus an employee, and then we did have that discussion. But, if we're going to, we really have to see, I'd like to see the way the Attorney General's opinion is on it, and then, we continue to try to talk with as many of our neighbors as possible, and see how important it is. And then we have to, let's do a benefit analysis, having an employee or a contract. In my mind, we did that earlier, and that's why I was so forceful that we need to stay with a contractor, because you can get out of it in 30 days, and there's no repercussions for one big one. You could go down the list. So, but anyway,
I'll take a look at that
Okay.
and report back.
thank you, Rob.
Any other comments on this?
But in the meantime, we're month to month. Is that?
Yes.
The only comment I wanted to make, and I still believe, and it could be Andrew, that we need a full-time finance director. I really believe that, and I'm going to explain why. I did a public information request. A little birdie had told me to pull it on this one employee, and Mr. Cade, for a 6-month period from 1/1/23 to 6/30/2023, he clocked 1,320 hours. Now, he's a salaried employee, so if you do a 40-hour work week, 160 hours a month, that's 960 hours. So being a salaried employee, he put in an extra 360 hours, and I'm worried about the quality of life, work-life balance for our employees, that if we had a full-time finance director, we could share the wealth with all of this, and then this gentleman could spend more time at home. And that's just my thoughts on the subject.
There's 3 people in the finance department in addition to Andrew. So if you only pulled the hours of one employee, the makeup might not be, and I don't know what that person does. I think that if you're looking at how many hours a salaried employee is putting in, you can't look at just one person. You've got to look at the whole department. And what are their duties? They may not be things that really cross. It may not be something that the finance director would do just, and I have no idea. But I think we've discussed many times that the city doesn't need a full-time finance director. I'm willingly walking down the road that we need to hire, if that's what comes, to hire someone, but not full-time. Maybe with a little bit more information Robin could probably provide, or Andrew could, as to the department. Maybe the department needs a part-time paper person or data entry person. I have no idea, because I don't know what that person even does.
Okay.
Just a thought. If we're going to discuss it, let's get some more information and have a real discussion.
Any other discussion on this? All right, next up, rules of reading emails. On the Clarendon Consulting? Yeah, please, come on up.
Hello, folks. Doug Andrews, 90 141st Avenue here in Madeira. I'll be short. I just kind of want to reiterate something I've said to you a bunch of times when I've talked to you individually. Your job is to do what's in the best interest of the city, period, okay? There's not people out there picketing saying, let's get rid of Andrew, let's get a full-time employee, because they don't know the finances and they don't know the backstory behind all this, okay? So remember, your job is to do what's in the best interest of the city, but I'm going to tell you, be careful, okay? Because if any of you know, and you guys weren't sitting on the board, but I know Anne Marie and Ray were on the planning commission back when we had a different finance director. Things weren't so good. And he was a full-time guy, making a full-time benefits, full-time employee, okay? But you guys, what you have to realize now, okay, you are tasked with one thing, and that's managing a balanced budget, okay? In the past couple of months, you've given away spots at Kitty Stewart Park, okay, which are now being used by residents that work at Caddy's as their executive parking lot now. So you've got that going for you, and we've lost somewhere probably between $50,000 and $60,000 for the year is what we're going to end up losing on that. Opening up the gym costs money. Insurance for commissioners is going to cost money, okay? You're spending money without any new corresponding revenue to offset that, okay? Fiscal conservative. It's a balanced budget. We just don't go ahead and say, okay, let's hire a full-time finance director just because we think we need it. We don't need it. It's been proven already. And if you look at those numbers, some of those numbers are astronomical. And then you tack on benefits, you tack on everything else. So Andrew's a pretty inexpensive option and a very good one at that, okay? So just think about it. I mean, because the bottom line is you keep spending money like this without corresponding revenue to back it up, you're going to be forced to raise the millage rate. And then you want to see picket signs, you want to see pitchforks, that's when you'll see it, okay, when you start reaching into people's pockets when you don't really have to. Nothing's wrong here. Everything's working perfectly. Leave it alone. Thanks.
Any other comment? Okay, we'll move over to the next item then, rules of reading emails into the record. We have any? Oh, yeah, do we have any public comment on this first? Okay, no public comment?
So I asked for this to be put on the agenda. I've had several conversations with individuals within our community, residents, who did not understand the reading, did not understand why we would read things that weren't vetted, and then wanted to understand why some would not be read. On the record, I'm against it. I'm against speaking in a dialogue with a resident when they come up also, because in the training that I've taken since I have come into office, it is showing favoritism to read one person's letter and not read them all, shows favoritism to get in a dialogue with a resident or a individual at the podium, but not get in a dialogue with everyone. And I think in showing favoritism based on the classes I've taken, it puts us on a slippery slope to be accused of that very thing, showing favorites. So I think that if we're going to read letters from residents, and in this case, we had a resident letter, and we had someone who does not even live in our city letter. We need to have some rules. It needs to be a rule. We can't just, I don't feel like it's the right thing to do based on the conversations that I've had with residents for us to pick and choose who we read, unless we want a resident to file a complaint that we are showing favoritism to some people over others.
Thank you for bringing this up and putting it on the agenda. I would agree. I think it's a bad precedent to read any emails, because if you read any, you have to read them all. And I don't know about you guys, but I get some pretty hot emails that I wouldn't spend time reading. So it's a slippery slope to read an email that would support an opinion you might have, or support anything. I mean, you can use that to make your own judgments and even take key points from it if you prefer in any dialogue that you have, but to just strictly read them, I think that's a slippery slope that we don't want to get into.
City Attorney, would you offer an opinion here?
You have a rule of procedure on this, and I'm just going to read you the rule.
Okay.
I'm reading from your Rules of Procedure book, page 17 of 19, paragraph 6, public comment. And it's specifically referring to the order of business at regular meetings. It says, this section is reserved for public participation on matters of concern pertaining to city business and which are not on the agenda. Public comment is made in person and not represented by emails, tweets, or other types of information unless there is a declared state of local emergency requiring virtual meetings of the Board of Commissioners. Public comment is subject to the following protocol. And then it goes into the manner of addressing. Do you want me to read that?
Please.
Okay. So this is titled Manner of Addressing the Board of Commissioners. Each person addressing the Board of Commissioners shall step up to the microphone, give his or her name and address and the organization or group they represent, if any, in an audible tone of voice for the record, and shall limit their address to 3 minutes unless extended by the mayor. For more time may be granted to applicants and affected persons with legal standing in quasi-judicial hearings. Yielding of time for an additional 3-minute period is allowed. If no time is yielded, the person speaking can ask for additional time to speak. If the additional time is appropriate, the presiding officer can offer the commissioners the opportunity to consent to the extension. And then the next section under the same paragraph, comment cards. Comment cards may be completed by individuals from the audience, whether it is a public forum, question, or an agenda item. The comment card shall be available at the back of the commission chambers, and the individual shall write their name, address, and a brief comment about what it is that they would like to talk about. The city clerk shall keep the cards and will identify the individual to come forward and speak. It is not mandatory that a speaker complete a comment card. And then the last thing under that paragraph is titled Reading of Protests. Interested persons or other authorized representatives may address the Board of Commissioners for the reading of protests, petitions, or communications relating to any matter over which the Board of Commissioners has jurisdiction. So, those are the rules that you've adopted.
Okay. Right, we shall follow them then.
I thought they were amended to 5 minutes, and that in lieu of, you didn't have to read your address. In lieu of that, you had to state that you were a resident or which party you represented, who you represented.
I'm reading from the resolution, Board Rules of Procedure, Resolution 2021-01, which was adopted on April 14th, 2021.
Well, this would have been in 2023.
Yeah, I have a recollection of that, too. I don't believe it changed the section relative to the reading of the emails, though.
No, I don't think, it wouldn't. It wouldn't, but just point of order.
The only thing I might like to add is that we do get, because Vice Mayor, you brought this up, we do get a lot of emails that are full of, yeah, lots of information and lots of accusations and what people think to be true and not. And I received those types of emails when I sat on the Planning Commission. You would have also. And I just think that we have a good group sitting up here. We seem to speak to each other respectfully. And I think that we should keep ourselves mindful that we are sitting up here serving the residents of Madeira Beach, not a single person, but them collectively and doing what is best for the city. And one of the things that I took as a practice when I receive an email and it's got lots of things in it that I read it and I think, well, I know that's not accurate or that's not accurate, not because I could sit down and pull something up, but because I've sat in meetings and I know that, somebody didn't say this because I was at that meeting. I like to take the time to look at the email and myself go line by line, accusation by accusation, and research, and sometimes it's asking a question of our attorney or of the finance department or of Robin. And I don't ask questions of anyone else that works for the city because they are the three people that we are to go to. And Robin has never not gotten me back an answer. Now, he'll go to the appropriate person or gather the appropriate information. So there's truth in the emails, but there's also a lot of not truth that can cause a lot of misinformation. And we 5 should be well informed of the facts.
Well said.
Anything else, commissioners? All right, next, item F, update on ethics complaint against former VM Doug Andrews.
So I put this one too. I'd like to tell why I put it. I've been asked by multiple people about the pending ethics complaint filed against the former vice mayor and our city manager. Several individuals that have had conversations with me thought, based off of what they have heard, seen or read on social media, and the refusal of the mayor to make a comment or to the comment and taking a stance to not withdraw the complaint for the betterment of our community, they believed that the vice mayor and Robin, our city manager, were guilty of ethics violations. And so I bring this up because I would like it on the record the outcome of that so that our residents understand where our city manager and past vice mayor stand in this situation.
So back on June the 14th, the State of Florida Commission on Ethics filed the following, I guess, public report and order dismissing complaint. So both complaints were dismissed. The complaint is hereby dismissed for failure to constitute a legally sufficient complaint with the issuance of this public report. So they did not find any the complaint did not indicate any factual, substantive, non-conclusory manner that the respondent used or abused their position to achieve a benefit for themselves or others. So those were the complaint failed to indicate a violation of the Florida Constitution. And that was for both complaints. I believe there was a subsequent complaint filed against the former vice mayor, and according to what I don't have that document, but that one appears to have also been dismissed for lack of evidence. So that's what the city received.
Thank you, Robin.
Any other comments from commissioners? Okay. Please come up.
Hello again. Doug Andrews, 90 141st Avenue here in Madeira Beach. Since I am the affected party, I probably won't go over 5 minutes. I just want a little leeway. I truly hope not to be up here, actually. Mr. Mayor, this is completely your doing. I'm a resident, a business owner in town, and also a former commissioner and vice mayor. And protecting my reputation here is of the utmost importance. I kindly asked you when I received my plaque for my service to drop your baseless ethics complaint and to apologize for heckling women and children in your Jeep during the election. Did you know? You decided to double down. And I hope, honestly, you're as loquacious with me as you are with the other people that stand at the podium here. Because at the May 2023 BOC regular meeting, after Commissioner Brooks again repeated and asked you to drop this in the interest of the community, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't want this to go on forever. Your comment was you're going to weigh in on this. The only way the ethics complaints are going to be dropped is for Andrews to plead guilty because he is guilty of extortion. Those are pretty big words, sir. And this is currently being escalated to the highest levels of the state, okay? Mr. Mayor, did you say this?
I did.
Okay. Was any of that true?
Repeat the question.
Was any of the statements that you made true?
Yes.
Really? You better be careful. This is slander, sir. The state's already ruled on this. Were any of your complaints true?
Yes, they were. Please continue with your
Excellent,
conversation, sir.
excellent. Okay, so you definitely don't want to retract anything. You do realize that the state said you never escalated anything, and there was no evidence. They never even asked me for a response to these allegations, okay? You use them as a political play. Please don't rush me, sir. I watched you stand up here in your Halloween costume and berate me, so I'm going to finish my statement.
Can I jump in for just a second?
Sure, do whatever you'd like.
I took John Hendrick's suggestions halfway. He said to drop the complaint. I offered I was not going to submit any additional evidence. And then calling the state, they said they would just let the complaint drop from there.
You are absolutely lying right in front of everybody on this camera.
Absolutely not.
You called, wait a minute, why did they issue a ruling on it if you dismissed the complaint?
I didn't say I dismissed the complaint. I said I was going to offer no additional evidence. Therefore, they would just drop the complaint.
What additional evidence did you have, sir?
We're not going to discuss that.
Yeah, of course you're not. I thought, wait a minute, I thought you were the man of the people
That's a private
here.
matter. That's a private matter.
You made it a public matter when you called me an extortionist, sir, okay?
Would you continue with your comments?
You did not You did not respond to them. Why did they issue a dismissal if you responded to them to drop it? It would have just dropped. They wouldn't have issued a statement. You are a liar, sir. You're standing in front of the people of this town, and you're lying yet again. You're lying that you don't know Ken Weiss. You're lying that you didn't know Bill Gay. You continue to lie to these people. You lied. Well, we'll go on. We'll go on. By the way, what happened to your second complaint, the one you wrote the day after you won the election? What happened to that one?
I'm not going to offer any more comments to you, sir.
Because the people don't have the right to know? I thought that's your mantra. That's what you told everybody.
This is a
You're
pro-
Mr. Transparent. It's not a private matter. You made it a public matter. Don't you tell me to lower my voice. You sat here when I was sitting right there in your little Halloween costume and started screaming and yelling, okay, and stomping off the stage saying that your family was endangered. Do you want to respond on that? That I endangered your family? Or that you had a protected address? Google yourself, sir. Let me see how many times your address, your and your wife's address pops up on Google. For somebody who wants a protected address, why not put a yard sign in front of your house? Why put a billboard in front of your house? Was there a car in front of your house that you were endangering your family that you told everybody about?
I don't know what you're talking about.
You didn't make that statement. You didn't make that statement. Boy, it's really tough telling the truth, isn't it? It's really difficult. Okay?
You'll have to summarize. You're almost out of time.
Oh, you're going to cut me off. I'm an affected party, sir. I'll keep coming back. Don't worry.
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, but I do give you credit. It was believable because Commissioner Taglerini, I wish he was here to discuss this, he broke protocol by going directly to the, oh, am I done out of time?
I'll let you,
Thank you.
I'll give you a minute to summarize.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
All right. Mr. Taglerini, because of what, did you talk to Mr. Taglerini about this evidence? No? You never said anything to him? I've got the emails if you'd like to see them, sir. You want to lie some more to the people? Mr. Taglerini requested an emergency hearing from the Civil Service Board about this. Do you know what's wrong with that, sir? Can you tell me why Mr. Taglerini can't request an emergency hearing from the Civil Service Board?
This was before I was elected. I'm not sure what you're talking
Do
about.
you know why you can't do it now that you're sitting in that big chair?
Yes.
You do know why. Can you tell me why you can't request it?
Please continue on.
Because you don't know the answer. Okay? You're a fraud. Seriously. Okay, last, did you harass women and children supporting my campaign while driving around in your Jeep and yelling inappropriate things at them? Is that a private matter too, or you want the people to know what went on? Sir? I'm waiting for your response.
I have no comment to you, sir.
You have no comment about that?
No, sir.
Okay.
I have no comment to you.
You have no comment? Why don't you comment? Oh, as soon as I'm done, you'll comment? That's great. You can't use this as a bully pulpit, sir, okay? You don't make the rules. You have a board of 5 people. They make the rules, not you, okay? From now on, remember that, okay? You owe me an apology.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Next up, ordinance 2023-07, the whistleblower ordinance.
Do you want me to handle this? Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So Mayor, Commissioners, this ordinance 2023-07 was prepared by our senior associate attorney, Rob Eschenfelder, a couple of years ago. It's been kind of in the hold pattern because of the Civil Service Commission was working on the rules of procedure. At several points during the process with that commission, Attorney Eschenfelder asked why this is not being placed on the agenda, that we need to move forward with it. There were some responses made, but ultimately it was decided to move forward with this. And so it is here for discussion purposes and ultimately to get on the commission agenda for consideration and approval. This ordinance does a couple of different things. It creates a process for investigating employee complaints against the city manager. Obviously, that has nothing to do with Robin because this was started a couple of years ago, so I don't want anybody to go down some path that we're doing this because of something that Robin was involved in. Absolutely not. It was a determination made that, that there was no process if there was a complaint against the city manager. And so this was kind of moving it forward to a point of let's create a process. So that's what this ordinance does. It creates a process where if an employee had a complaint against the city manager, what would actually happen with that? And the details of it are in Section 1, talking about complaints about the city manager of the process. It basically really revolves around the complaint going to the mayor, and the mayor having certain processes which he would go through in receiving the complaint and investigating the complaint, or appointing an investigation as to the allegations, if there were any, against the city manager. So that's the first part of the ordinance. The second part of the ordinance is what we call a whistleblower provision. This section of the ordinance, separate and apart from the process for employee complaints against the city manager, is dealing with a process to receive information from an employee, an independent contractor for the city, or an employee of an independent contractor. And it allows this procedure to take place where an individual can make or disclose certain information that must fit into one of these categories that are listed in the ordinance. The first one is that there is a violation or suspected violation of any federal, state, or local law, rule, or regulation committed by an employee or agent of the city or an independent contractor of the city, which creates and presents a substantial and specific danger to the public's health, safety, and welfare, or any act or suspected act of gross mismanagement, malfeasance, misfeasance, gross waste of public funds, suspected or actual Medicaid fraud or abuse, or gross neglect of duty committed by an employee or an agent of the city or an independent contractor of the city. So if one of those complaints comes in, this ordinance provides for the procedure in investigating those different types of disclosures. It also addresses the fact that retaliation is absolutely prohibited for those persons who have made those disclosures. The city cannot retaliate against them. It also provides a section relative to the persons protected by that disclosure. And then, obviously, it addresses the confidentiality of that person, his or her name or identity. That will remain confidential during the complete investigation period. So although I'm not an expert on this, I'm bringing it forward because our senior associate, Rob Eschenfelder, has created it and is recommending approval. I'll try to answer any questions that you may have. Otherwise, I may have to have Rob come to the regular meeting and address them there. So hopefully I can answer your questions, if you have any.
So I have a question. When I read this, it has, when a complaint comes in, that it goes directly to the mayor. And I read it and I understand the reason for that. My question is, if we are a body that makes decisions collectively, this is assigning the mayor to make the decisions independently up until a certain point when it comes to the commission. So I would, not that I would question that. I'm sure that it is fine because he wrote it that way, but do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah.
If the mayor can't direct anybody in the city to do anything.
Correct.
Independently.
Correct.
But in this case, the mayor would be the independent person conferring with the attorney, going through the process of an investigation, and the commission would not become involved until the investigation is completed, and then would make the decision on whether to take action.
That is
Correct?
correct.
Okay.
And the idea, I think, is you don't want to have too many chiefs and not enough Indians. That's a terrible analogy. Sorry. Too many people
Showing our age.
Too many people doing the investigating and not being able to come to a collective conclusion. So if you have a point person,
Right.
and that's the idea, is to have a point person with the help of the city attorney's office when a complaint comes in.
And that is how I read it. I only wanted to speak it out into the conversation, but I read it that way, and I read it because if a complaint came in about the city manager, the five of us, I mean, could not meet and make decisions where a single point person would make that phone call to the city attorney, would meet with the city attorney, take the necessary steps, gather it all together, and then bring it.
Right, and that doesn't mean that once the report is complete or the investigation is complete by the mayor, that there can't be additional investigation or supplemental investigation before an actual decision is made. So, for example, if the mayor goes down the path and he thinks he's gathered all the correct information, all the information needed for the five of you to make a decision, and we get here and we find out, well, we didn't think about this one other thing, and then we could go back there and get a more complete report or a supplemental report. So you're giving, if this ordinance is adopted, you're giving the mayor that position to be the point person. Okay.
I would agree with that.
I like that Cliff Note version. And it makes perfect sense because we meet every other week, twice a month, where to expedite things, you would need to meet on a pretty regular basis as a finding of fact of what actually transpired, which,
Well, and that would all be done in the sunshine up here, which I would think would be,
well, the finding of fact wouldn't be done in the sunshine, but the actual deliberation of what those
Right.
findings were would be done up here, and collectively there'd be a vote. If any action needed to be made, because the city manager works for the pleasure of the board.
well, I think what I meant was if we were all sitting, if a complaint came in and it was brought to us here, a complaint doesn't mean it's a fact. And
Right.
so that would be bad, because we would all sit up here and talk openly about a complaint that could be not factual, where when it's going to a single point, being the mayor, he would be the person who would speak with the attorney and would not slander the city manager or say things about the city manager that aren't true here. Do you know, that's what I meant. Yeah, so,
Needs an opportunity to work with the city attorney to
Yes.
figure out.
yes. I think it's good. I read it like 4 or 5 times so that I could read it and understand what it meant. So I think it's well-written, and it makes total sense to me.
Okay.
I'm not sure I follow 100% the whistleblower. Can I get Cliff Notes on that one more time?
So
I mean,
if
the
someone,
whistleblower protection.
if an employee, an independent contractor working for the city, or an employee of the independent contractor working for the city has information and fits into one of those two categories, that information comes into the city, and then now what are we going to do with that information? So,
Again, that would go to the mayor.
no, this is a different thing. This is going to go to the city manager under section 50-21A. Once a disclosure has been made, the city manager will confer with the mayor to determine whether an investigation is warranted, and if so, an appropriate course of investigation of the disclosure. In light of the specifics of the disclosure, laws and regulations may apply, and it goes on. So it's really the city manager that's controlling this, unless it's one of those situations where the city manager is the person being complained of. He is not doing what he's supposed to do under the charter, and that disclosure comes in, then it's going to be done a little bit differently. Section 50-21 talks about that process as to what a type of investigation, what level of formality, that type of thing will be completed when that disclosure is made to the city. Then obviously, there are the next two sections dealing with retaliation. So once that person makes that complaint, there is a requirement under your code, if you adopt this, that person shall not be retaliated because he or she came forward to make those statements, make those disclosures. And then the last part is the confidentiality. That person's identity would be kept confidential during the process, the investigation. It's basically to make sure that people that have information feel comfortable in making a disclosure that would otherwise be harmful to the city. So we're doing something, for example, we find out that someone is dumping chemicals from, Roundup chemical, into the goldfish pond or into the canal or whatever. Obviously, that would be a violation of a state, federal, or local law, and we'd want to protect that person when they made that disclosure.
Makes sense.
So we'd like to move it on and bring it and put it on the agenda at an upcoming meeting.
The first meeting in October for first reading and public hearing.
Any other comments on that? All right, next item up is local mitigation strategy program.
So Mayor and Commissioner, I'll start this because this is really sort of the catch-all item to go over our preparation, work during and post or after Hurricane Idalia, or originally Tropical Storm, then Hurricane Idalia. I think as you are aware, we met here for the commission to declare a local state of emergency within our city limits. We appreciate that. That was accomplished the evening before the storm's arrival. We were open to the public through Tuesday, the 29th of August, through midday, through noon, and then closed subsequently the rest of that day and on Wednesday, the 30th of August, as the storm kind of made its way, continued with its projected kind of trajectory or projected path through the Gulf of Mexico, eventually making a slight turn to the northwest, but it remained pretty far to the west of our coast. However, the storm itself and its outer bands, which wind and rain, and eventually, or as was forecasted, pushed the Gulf of Mexico waters onto our shoreline. Given the geography of our location along the Pinellas coastline, ourselves and pretty much all the way up through Sand Key, this island that we are on that stretches from Sand Key down to St. Pete Beach or Passagrille did receive a considerable amount of water pushed up onto and beyond the sand. The good news to kind of quick summary, the good news for us is we really not much of a wind event, not a significant rain event, but again, the Gulf water pushing onto and over the sand did cause some damage, minor, major damage to approximately, the latest that we have is about 100 structures, 100. The county has provided us a list. I don't recall if I forwarded the list. I mean, it has addresses, so the county has it, so it's a public document. I have it. It's a public document, and I'll certainly provide that and can provide that upon request. We had one structure totally destroyed that did catch fire that night, to which our fire staff responded to. But yeah, that was the damage that we received, mainly to residential. The 100 were nearly 100 residential. Commercial damage was limited to just some awnings, some signs that were knocked over, minor flooding. We're not aware of any destruction or significant flooding. We estimate, again, in these situations are where first of all, the governor declared a state of emergency several days before. Then the Board of Commissioners for the county declared a state of local emergency, which gives the county administrator a considerable kind of authority over the actions to include when an evacuation order is issued and then subsequently lifted. So that hopefully all our residents and businesses are aware, the actual emergency operations manager for our entire area is Pinellas County, and that's given that there are 24 municipalities, some as small as a couple hundred residents in Bel Air Shore, all the way up to St. Petersburg with a few hundred thousand, but to coordinate the response, the preparations and the response and the post-storm to the million or so residents spread across the 24 municipalities plus the unincorporated area. So the county administrator in conferring with the county emergency operations staff and through the county offices, they're the ones that issue the evacuation order. And that's what did happen for Tuesday as of 7 p.m. And then subsequently on Monday, the evacuation order was issued and then lifted after the storm had gone by our area on Wednesday at approximately 5 p.m. So contrary, we here at the city, none of you on the commission nor myself are provide or give the order or the decision when to issue an evacuation or when to lift the evacuation and allow folks back on the island. But once the storm, we believe that it's very difficult to determine, but certainly driving and in consultation with the deputies who were here working and then subsequently with our fire staff that did respond to calls, around approximately 75% evacuation rate. It may have been higher. We don't believe it was lower than that. We believe a very large number of our residents and certainly visitors did evacuate once the order was issued. I will tell you that just about every business was closed by, I'm going to say by Tuesday, for sure by noon. When I went to my place down the road and grabbed a few things and then came back here to City Hall, almost every business was closed, and certainly a lot of them were already boarded up and prepared for the storm. Very few people certainly walking or just in the city, but we don't really have an exact number. Eventually, once the storm did, we were seeing the impacts and the waters were rising, our fire staff did respond to, according to what the chief provided, about 35 calls. And of course, one of them was when the structure fire occurred. But the chief reported those in his update between about 1:45 in the morning when it started to get, the water was really, was noticeable and it was getting a little windier, till 5 p.m. the next day. Those were the calls that they responded to. About the calls were people who wanted to leave their house or their structure. So between Madeira Beach Fire, Seminole Fire, and the Sheriff's Office, utilizing their high water vehicles, they responded to those calls and went and picked people up at their property and then brought them across the bridge, the causeway, the Stewart Causeway, to the public shopping area. I was here along with a couple of the deputies and then eventually just Deputy Snyder, and then the fire across the street and the fire station. So those are our two emergency operation centers during the storm. At about, just watching and listening, and there were numerous meetings that were held with the county administrator, and throughout the day and into the evening. The last one was at approximately about 9 p.m., the last sort of update to everyone in the county. At about 12:15, I laid down to close my eyes a little bit, and then a couple hours later was awoken by Deputy Snyder, to which, responding to kind of the deteriorating conditions outside. We kind of took a look around our complex, around here. What was very helpful were the cameras that were installed last year here on this building, the rec center, the marina, that we were able to pull up a few of those cameras and see where the water was. So the canal behind us here, between Harbor Drive and this complex, obviously filled up. It was over the seawall, as I'm sure water was over most seawalls throughout the city, but we were able to visually see that it had not protruded all the way up to the ground floor of this building. The water line was still probably 15 feet, and it never approached closer than that throughout the entire storm event. So even though Gulf Boulevard was underwater, 153rd probably had about 8 inches or so underwater. Municipal Drive had water, Rex Place. This area stayed free of water protruding into the buildings or even the parking lot out front. So at approximately 3:15 in the morning, over the sheriff's radio, there was an order given, and I'm sure the captain knows how there were a series of numbers and letters that were mentioned, and which was the order to evacuate all the deputies off the barrier island. So Deputy Snyder, as I've shared before, when they evacuate, that's when I leave, and our EOC is then off the island. And so that communication was with the sheriff's office. Deputy Snyder and I proceeded to then go across the bridge to the public shopping plaza where we were observing the high water vehicles and a few of the fire engines. Treasure Island and Seminole went through there at one point. If I recall correctly, on three separate occasions, the high water vehicles bringing between 2 and 3 people back to the public shopping plaza, so between approximately 3:45 and 5:15 in the morning. The area that we need to work on a little bit is those individuals were then stuck at the public shopping plaza. So that was not coordinated as what to do after rescuing, because that's how those are termed, is rescuing folks. However, you do throw in the question of they did not evacuate. So they should have evacuated. Fortunately, with this storm, it was not a significant wind event, so none of the first responder operations were suspended. But had the constant wind speeds exceeded, I think it's 45 miles an hour, then those responses, we would not have responded to calls for service, even if somebody called and said, hey, I'm on my roof, you need to rescue me from your roof. Those would not have been responded to. At approximately 5:30, then I returned back here to the island. Power had gone out to pretty much everywhere south of here to Johns Pass. Progress Energy, Duke Energy reported that power did go out at approximately 1:45 in the morning. And they gave some specific information as to the outage. What they called a feeder breaker, so that one was reported at 1:45, the other at 2:28 in the morning, and then a third one at 2:27. So the outages essentially cut out all the customers from the Madeira Beach school just to the north of 150th, all the way down to Johns Pass, were then without power. I do not have when power was restored, but I believe that was sometime around 2 p.m. on Wednesday. I don't remember if Commissioner McGinn, you told me that, or Mayor, that when I drove past my place on 143rd at 11 a.m., then again at 12:30, and we were still without power, but at least the water had receded at that point. So when I returned at 5:30, of course, the entire side of the city was completely dark. I attempted to drive down Madeira East 1st Street and saw that the water was pretty high, so I did not attempt to go down 1st Street, then drove to the front of I think it's Madeira Commons Plaza, at the corner of 150th and Gulf Boulevard, and observing south on Gulf Boulevard, there was debris on the road, and the water was much higher there than on 1st Street East, so I decided not to proceed down and just return back to City Hall. There was, again, considerable water on Gulf Boulevard from 150th to 153rd, but it was still passable at that time in the morning. Did not observe any other vehicles until about a half hour later when the deputies came back on approximately about 6 a.m., 6:15, when the deputies returned to the island. So here as daylight kind of gave way, it was still, obviously you could see water. Our cameras in this area still showed a considerable amount of water, not very much debris. Of course, there were palm fronds and some branches around, and And I did observe actually driving that the awning in front of the Waterfront Realty Plaza part of it had fallen down, but no other significant visible damage. It wasn't until we started getting reports about 7:30 to 8 a.m. as people went out. And I think, Mayor, you were probably out at that time or maybe a little earlier, and reporting how as the water began to recede, and certainly our fire staff, as they were returning from the fire on 141st near Palm, how much sand had been left, primarily on Gulf Boulevard and 141st. And certainly that area was appeared to be the most impacted by water. And that partially as the water just streamed across Gulf Boulevard from the lot adjacent to Tom and Kitty Stewart Park, which we'll get to in a moment. But from that point on, just reports coming in, our public works staff returned, and then they started going around and surveying for damage, and we were getting some emails and calls. And so that continued for the rest of really the better part of that day. By the time I drove out, again, as I said, about 11 or 11:15, noticed that there were still like 144th, 145th North Bay Shore was still underwater. Parts of Boca Ciega were still underwater, 137th. Kind of the lower spots in the city were still under floodwaters. And of course, the just significant amount of sand from about 142nd all the way down to 137th. So the county was notified. The county, some of their staff were out here that morning and documented the amount of sand, and that's where the process began to communicate with FDOT or through the county public works to FDOT, to their contractors, to then schedule to begin to mobilize to remove the sand. So that started as at approximately around 2 o'clock is when the contractor arrived on site and began the process to remove the sand. Obviously the source or a significant source of what occurred in that area, again from about 141st down to 137, was a vacant lot just to the south of Tom and Kitty Stewart Park, where 2 structures within the last year were demolished. The most recent one was just a little over in July, toward the end of July. And again, the property owner and their contractors submitted a permit to have the structure demolished. They demolished the structure, removed everything on the lot in order for future redevelopment. They are planning to construct on that site. It appears that part of the demolition, well, it doesn't appear, but the demolition, again, removed what they needed to remove, what you would normally do in a demolition, and removed what was a concrete structure like a wall that probably had been there for several decades. Whether that contributed to the rush of water, likely it did. They did have a silt fence on the property, but that was no match for the Gulf water. I mean, it just went right through it, right over it. So it certainly a concern for numerous residents, and that's what led to that. We've discussed internally in the future, we will look at, do we likely not issue any demo permits during hurricane season for any structures on the sand? Going forward, looking back, you don't really know what may be on a property and what needs to be removed, but I can, at a prior city, the 3 years that I was city manager, a little over 3 years, over 200 structures were demolished in an older, aging city, and you find amazing things when you start demoing a structure, particularly one that's been there for several decades. So that eventually led to, as our staff went around and noted other impacts from the storm, communications with the county were ongoing as to when the access to the island would be reopened. The discussions included that Treasure Island, St. Pete Beach, Madeira Beach were in pretty bad shape, in terms of water and sand, well, debris, but specifically sand on Gulf Boulevard. So that was communicated, the county was aware of that, but the mitigation, the removal, sand removal, debris removal was underway. Eventually, the county did lifted the evacuation order effective at 5 p.m. on Wednesday. There were, from what was communicated to me, there were considerable, obviously at all entry points to the island, considerable number of people, cars, waiting to come back on the island. The decision to lift the order and allow folks back on the island also stemmed from, obviously, folks wanting to return, but also really schools wanting to reopen for the following school day, for Thursday, which they did. And in order to make that a little bit easier, folks need to be at their homes and, even though you may not have power, but to get ready for that, and the schools needed to prepare for the reopening of school the next day. I filled out a survey earlier today regarding the storm that the county sent out, and one of my main comments was that in the future, I think the cities need to be a little bit more involved in that decision to determine, well, wait a minute, we're not quite ready. And Madeira Beach was not ready because of the work being done, from 100, well, really from all the way down to 146th, where the lane, the signs were listed, lane closures and work ahead for the sand removal all the way down to about 135th. And that caused a considerable traffic backup for at least a couple of hours. Now, I drove through there several times, and I was stopped along with traffic. I think the largest amount of time, about 2 minutes and 15 seconds. But it did cause a long queue in both directions. The DOT contractor was lifting and placing and getting ready to remove all the sand. But what they did is they didn't close one side of Gulf Boulevard. They were kind of working on a side and then a little bit more on the other side. And so Gulf Boulevard was down to one lane. So one lane, traffic would move northbound, then they would stop and then allow the vehicles to move southbound and vice versa. And they were doing that in about a 2-minute interval. So that caused a queue. At the same time, and I've had several residents inquire, the barrier reentry program, the passes, they were not checked. So the sheriff, why did the sheriffs or the county not implement that? And really the answers that I've received are, well, there wasn't a significant damage. There wasn't destruction. There wasn't mass amount of destruction. There wasn't the fear of looting or anything to that effect. And that's really a control measure to determine, if in the event of a disaster or Hurricane Ian, that you truly only allow back onto the island those that live on the island. Were there people returning that did not live here or have a business? The answer is likely yes. We don't know for 100%, but reports from people who were in the traffic in the queue indicate that they let everybody in. Again, we don't know if there were people who were just curious and, hey, let's go out to the beach and see what it looks like. I'm sure some of the people driving were that, but we're under the inferring that the majority of the people who were out driving were trying to return back to their homes or go to their businesses. And keep in mind, businesses had been closed, some of them since Monday. So not very long, but 2 full days is 2 full days, and so some were likely looking to return back. The fire department made the decision to kind of close the EOC at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, and they went back to the regular shifts. And I stayed here probably until about 10 o'clock until everything was kind of cleared. Of course, the contractor on Gulf Boulevard continued until about 11 o'clock that night, if I recall, and then most of the next day and then into Friday morning till they removed almost all the sand off of Gulf Boulevard and the sidewalks. Sand was still present on 141st and a couple of the private properties on the east side of Gulf Boulevard. Our public works and sanitation crews then began, obviously, the debris removal, which did take about 2 to 2 weeks for the original storm debris. As the weeks went on, more residents started putting out more debris, and clearly there were quite a few residents that decided to, hey, let me do even more cleaning, and so more, particularly yard waste, was placed over the next 2 weeks. As of this morning, pretty much all of our access points and streets are free of sand. Our street sweeper has been around several times. Of course, the debris removal continued, and we resumed our normal trash collection processes and routines. We still have a couple of areas that have sand on lawns, particularly a couple right on Gulf Boulevard. We've contacted the county to see what could be done. Their response is really, well, if the property owners or the city contract, that is something that is reimbursable by FEMA. To get to FEMA has been present, I believe, since the day after the storm, and they still are, and they went door to door. They even came here to City Hall to drop off information. We've been releasing their information from about September the 15th on. They produced a daily bulletin or daily fact sheet, and one of the most recent one from today, just giving reminders of what to do if people had not filed claims with their insurance or with FEMA. But as through today in this entire region, so I think it's an 11-county region for the disaster recovery, over $58 million had been approved for assistance, $58 million to 29,400 households. And that's in the 11-county area. I've heard from residents here that they have already received some FEMA assistance in the form of, in essence, kind of in the form of an outright grant for you to use to either reimburse yourself for the cleanup, et cetera, or for cleanup repairs that will be made going forward. So FEMA will be here, and they have the facility where people can go in person up in Palm Harbor. That is still open on 16th Street in Palm Harbor. But they are still out. The Red Cross, a few other nonprofits were also going around and offering assistance, particularly for folks who may not have been able to clean up their own structure or house, or if they needed assistance with any, if they could not get out, if they needed food or clothing or things, they were kind of doing that door to door. And again, we just continued issuing messages. People could go on our website and fill out their damage with the county. About 60% of the 100 structures that we received the damage, those were reported to the county or through their reporting. The majority of the rest were through our staff going out and observing, and also knocking on doors and asking if they had any other damage. We did waive the demo permits through September the 8th. I think we were going to look to expand that, but certainly we'll work with any any property owners to get their property. We've been issuing parking passes where there's some parking limitations or folks that are doing repairs. So that's kind of probably a lot more than you wanted to hear. I'd be happy to take any questions or any other comments as I look through the rest of my notes.
That email for is it floridaassistance.gov that Madeira residents could go under? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And so post-storm, then the local mitigation strategy that we've been a part of has existed, is a program, and I think probably Marcy and Jenny know a lot more about it than I do, allows property owners to flood prone their home as much as you can. And I believe there are two distinct programs, one in which they go directly through FEMA for that, and another one that we have participated in the past where we were the kind of the grant, what would be the term, the grants went through the city, but it was only a limited number, and I think that started back in 2013 or 14. It's been numerous years, but I may have shared with the commission in the past briefly that that program, we've run into some issues where we currently have one lawsuit against the property owner because they did not comply with the program, and so FEMA has not reimbursed us because the work that was done did not meet the FEMA guidelines or rules or laws, and therefore we are trying to recover that from the homeowner, the property owner, excuse me. So there are a couple of programs that are in your packet, a lot more of the details as to what those are and what can be done. I don't know if you guys, anything to add?
Yeah, when it comes to the FEMA and the opportunities out there for funding, there's a significant amount of them. It can get kind of pretty confusing. Our participation in the LMS basically is our way of saying, you know, we're here to help the community become resilient. We're doing all these activities to help, you know, get people out of flood's way, to help properties. And so by participating in that, that qualifies us. FEMA looks at us as a, you know, a good community to give grants to. The the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program is a post-disaster program. So after, just like what we had, that kicks in. Those projects are based on what we submit to the mitigation working group here in Pinellas County. So those projects are all predetermined by the jurisdictions, they pick them. Those are hands down, 100% always infrastructure related. So while it does say that you can have private property, the ones that the working group in Pinellas County support and are behind are the ones that basically help with infrastructure, resiliency, fire stations, generators. And they will also, the one thing they seem to be in favor of is acquisition. So if we wanted to go in and buy somebody's home, their property, and turn it into green space for the rest of its life, the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program that is part of our LMS, so we would be able to present that. So that is a post-disaster plan. The other is the FMA program, which is a pre-disaster grant program, and those are the ones that we participated in 2013, 2014. Those allow for acquisition as well, elevation of an existing structure, or demolition reconstruction, and those each have their own limitations, funding limitations, square footage limitations. So those all have their little nuances to them. That's kind of the brief thing. I did see in the packet there was the HMGP for the safe rooms, and we wouldn't qualify for that because we're in a special flood hazard area. There seems to be a caveat that FEMA has that basically says, per executive order, you can provide us with 8 steps and try to get it, but it's to preclude special flood hazard areas from getting the safe rooms. So to answer that question, that's really not something we would be able to support. The way it works too for the grants is the state, we would be a sub-applicant. So we would create the grants. The citizens would decide if they wanted to participate. We would then bundle them up as a municipality, send them to the state. The state then looks at everything they've received in the state, decide what they want to go for, bundle it up, send it to FEMA. So there's a big cycle of how that goes. But individual homeowners cannot submit to get the FMA. It would have to go, we would have to represent that. That's why we end up paying out the money, then waiting to get reimbursed, and end up in the situation we found ourselves in the 2013, 2014 cycle. So it's a lot of information, so if you guys have specific questions, I'll do my best to answer them, but there's a lot of moving parts to it, so.
And also I've heard from residents that a few that did go to the FEMA Center up in Palm Harbor, they asked these questions like, hey, can I raise, what can I, and they did get a considerable amount of information as to how to do that. So that's good because that's one thing that FEMA does. We're not really in the business of the last program that Marcy said, and I think there's a few more negatives than positives to participate in that program, which is what where we are now. However, it is an option that is available. It does require, again, that we provide the money in advance and then wait to be reimbursed, which is a little bit of the drawback because it's heavily dependent on the property owner doing the right things, and unfortunately, that did not happen with all of them. Most of them, but it only takes one to kind of, just ruin it, for lack of a better term. But FEMA has been extremely, extremely helpful, from what our residents have said, and especially, and I've probably heard from about 5 that have asked, how can I, in essence, raise my home? I have a one-story, how can I, only one said, I think I can demo and then build the 2 or 3 level, which can be more expensive than trying to lift your home, but I don't think every home qualifies to just be raised. There's a lot of the engineering, topographical, geographical components that go to it, but we currently, I think, have 2 or 3 that's what they're doing. They're currently raising their structure, their home. So the good news is there are multiple programs. They are available. FEMA has been extremely helpful from what all the indications that we have received. It's a matter of how we go forward. Part of our legislative funding, and we will have more at the October workshop, we have some seawalls that we did put in our budget for city infrastructure to replace, and we're looking for possibly some funding from the legislature because that does qualify for their resiliency and hardening funding. And we're also looking we'll be looking for, again, an appropriation from the state for our next road project, Area 9, which includes the Bay Point area that has been the subject of some discussion at recent meetings. That road project would incorporate also with that, adding some valves that would hopefully help to alleviate future flooding. How can we keep sand off of well, that's not really an issue in the Bay Point area, keeping sand off the streets, or hopefully that's never the case because then it would be a bigger issue, but obviously how to keep the flooding from occurring. And once, those streets are milled and resurfaced, you add valves, it adds a little bit more protection from the flooding. Are we able to elevate the streets? I'm not the engineer, but I think that has some positives, more drawbacks possibly, in terms because there are houses that will be further below the street, but if you're able, obviously, to maneuver the water away from homes, then it's not as big of an issue. And I think there are 2 homes on Bay Point that were among the ones that received major damage because they are below the street. And I know that one of them has a sump pump, but there's no way to be able to prevent that much, even a foot not even a foot, but about 4 inches of water, I think, is the max to be able to keep the water from going into the ground floor. And I think they reached probably 8 or 9 inches of water at one point. So they received significant damage, and I think the house, it's a 2-story house. But so we're aware of the programs, what we can do. We will continue to have more discussions and then begin, based on your input from the commission, how and which programs to consider, or if you want us to consider all of them, the ones that we can. But certainly FEMA, I think right now is the lead for anybody looking to potentially receive funding, or there's also very low interest loans through the Small Business Administration that can be used both for recovery and not just for businesses, but also for residential, but also for the hardening of your home as well. But those are loans, they are not grant programs. So it's a little bit, you need to repay those back, but the interest rates are very low.
I would like to have that discussion about raising the roads, but let's do that at another workshop. It's kind of getting late. I think it's something we have to consider, and whether that's valves or when we're talking about rainwater. If we raise the roads, we're talking about rainwater. We're not talking about tidal surge and salt water. So there must be a way to be able to do that, in my opinion. And actually have the drainage, especially like in Bay Point, every one of them is connected to the intercoastal. So, but I found something curious here. I did have some experience speaking with many years ago. I don't know if it was 5 or 10 or whatever, but on the prevention side and what was available, and then as you have written here, under your flood mitigation, for preventive, if the property is in a severe repetitive loss property, the cost share is 100%. We've seen a couple of homes take advantage of that. I know it's very restrictive, and but the grants are significant. Some of them I'm sure that you've been involved with are like $200,000 grants in that range. And then the next two I'm not familiar with. It's a repetitive loss, but it's 90%. But then what really is interesting to me is if the property is not in a severe or repetitive loss property, the cost is 75% federal, 25% non-federal. I don't need to get into that at this point. I'm just, are these types of preventative programs actually available? But the city would have to get involved, and we've had a bad experience with that.
Yeah, that's accurate. And with the FMA programs, just to give you an idea, like if we were to pursue that, that would be something that would come available to start applying for in like July, August of 2024. And the residents wouldn't see or hear whether they were awarded them or not till probably 2026. So just to give you an idea, there is a long lead time. And the money is very limited. What they'll do is they'll run a benefit cost analysis. And as an example, right now, their benefit cost analysis for mitigation reconstruction, if you were to tear your home down and rebuild, the most you will get from them is $220,000. And if they run the cost analysis and say, okay, this is worth $400,000, that's all you get to spend to rebuild your home, from foundation, your displacement.
So that's the limiting factor. You can't spend, you're not allowed to spend more than 400.
No,
to
even if it's
qualify for
your
the 200.
own money, yes. And so, and then in perpetuity, that property has to carry flood insurance, NFIP flood insurance. And we've ran into an issue where people purchased a home, paid cash, and basically said, the heck I am, and they're not paying it. So there's some issues with that, but mainly, honestly, the benefit cost analysis for our area, it just doesn't support being able to do it. And you can't skirt it, because then we're coming out the money, and when people try to, let's just wiggle this in or wiggle that in, it just does not work with these
You're going to have a
grants.
hard time building
You're
a
gonna
home.
have a very hard time, yep. Yes, a very hard time.
For 400.
Well, for instance, several of them were limited, maximum construction costs, $346,000. I mean, there's literally, even if they're giving you 150 towards construction and then a sum towards displacement, the numbers just don't work. If they did, I would be so excited, but
Yeah,
I've-
you're 6 digits before you put the first wall up.
Yeah, exactly. And even with elevation, there's similar limitations. And I can bore you to death with it, but if you have a nice porch and your living space is X amount, that's all you get to elevate is your living space. You lose your porch and you get to put stairs up to get to your home, and that's it. So there's a ton of limiting factors to it that I think people get super disappointed about once you really get down to it. So.
That's good information. Yeah, and I just want to make mention, you mentioned some people are raising their homes, and the main benefit, and correct me if I'm wrong, the reason they're doing that is so that their property taxes don't increase. Is that correct? Because they're still the same home, you've raised it, versus rebuilding, you're going to be reassessed at a new property value, so your save your home taxable value doesn't change versus rebuilding it would. You wouldn't be grandfathered in like they tried to do during the last election, which failed.
Yeah, and then that's a great point too. I mean, obviously most of them are trying to, get above the base flood elevation, but that's a good point too about the tax implications. I mean, I'm sure that's.
I'm pretty sure, but I was looking for confirmation, but.
Yeah, I don't have that,
There are.
unfortunately. I looked at a lot of different angles, but I would think there would be. That's probably a pro for it as well.
Yeah. There's nothing really that we're planning to vote on. It was more of a recap of where we were and how.
Discussion, just to give you a recap of what we did. There were a lot of questions that were raised, and just to provide as much data as we have, the county estimated, I failed to mention one of the 100 damaged structures. The county estimated about, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 7.2 million in damages, or an estimated value of the damage to the structures. And that's what they explained, that's what they had as of last Wednesday, which essentially was 3 weeks after the storm. They figure you haven't reported by then you're likely not to report. But that was because I was curious if they had any this past week, and they said no, the 20th was our last kind of report time frame. Back to, just wanted to go quick back to the process after in determining how to get back on the island. One thing that the county did state is, and is actually the sheriff did drive pretty much from Sand Key all the way down to Pass-a-Grille. So he observed what was, going on, as well as other county staff. So it wasn't just one or two people. I mean, from what I gathered and what I noted, it was a few, maybe up to a dozen, who did kind of observe and see what was going on to help make that determination. My comment about having the cities, or in this case probably, Clearwater, Indian Rocks, us, to St. Pete Beach, would have been, just give a little more time to let the contractors kind of finish what they're doing. And that's really what, in hindsight, should have happened. Is it a huge difference if 5 p.m. or 6 to 7 p.m.? Not really, but understanding that schools were opening the following day, and not all schools were utilized as shelters. I think only a few, and there weren't very many people in the shelters, which is the same last year for Hurricane Ian. But that's my comment, is if we, just kind of being here and the entire time, I think explaining to the county administrator and the sheriff at that, when they're making that decision, is something that I think the cities need to be more involved in.
Have you spoken to them about that?
I spoke when I sent, with Barry Burton a little bit, and then not with the sheriff, but with the staff. And they're well aware of it, from Captain Liner to his.
But the county makes that call.
Yeah, it's their call. I'm just trying to, advise them, and Barry Burton's aware of that, and I think the mayor spoke with Barry also about it, and so he was aware. And I think from my perspective, it's, as he and other county administrators have said over the years that I've been in Pinellas County, we're damned if we do and damned if we don't. It's not a good decision one way, and if the purpose is obviously to save lives and to save property, that's when an evacuation order is issued. Everybody needs to get off the island except those that need to be here, and that's the reality. And if there's ever an example of that, it's Hurricane Ian last year. And as I was sharing with Commissioner McGeehan earlier today, there is a documentary that was made about Ian, and it kind of chronicles 4 individuals who survived. They stayed behind in Fort Myers Beach, and all 4 were nearly killed. 2 of them were actually dragged and survived by hanging on the inside of their roof as their house was dragged 600 yards to the east by the Gulf waters. And there's a video showing a 24-hour time lapse of Fort Myers Beach, just 150 feet from the sand, the 15 feet of water that eventually covered everything you can see. And that's really an image that I think everybody that lives on this barrier island needs to see. When the county says leave, I will never wear one, but I think of the T-shirts, the hurricane evacuation plan that you see, grab beer, 1, grab beer, 2, run like hell. I mean, if that's what it takes to get you off the island, that's what we need to do to get off the island. Because the county is not, and nobody's just issuing that order just for the sake, but it's never going to be a popular decision. But it is something that people really need to think about. And I think most everybody does. But I can understand the fear. I mean, I was fearful for where I live. Now, I don't own the property, but all my stuff is in there as well, and for my family as well. But I have a different job, and my job is to oversee, the city here, the daily operations, so I'm going to do whatever I need to do, but I'm obviously concerned about my safety and my staff's safety first and foremost, so it's important that we take the orders as they're given, and that's why when the sheriff, or who, I don't know exactly who gave the order for all the deputies to evacuate the island, but that's when I left as well. I think, that's what we need to do. So in my parting statement is, evacuation order is issued, have your plan already, and please depart the island.
Is there typically a post-event meeting that you have with?
So we've had a couple, really to kind of how the cleanup is going, and the county's well aware of what I've said. There's another one, I think, probably the last one tomorrow. But yeah, there's communication back and forth. And again, they sent us a survey today that I filled out and pretty much stated my thoughts on it.
That's good. It's getting late. I don't want to, I'm sure I could come up with more questions, but I'm good.
Any other commissioners on this? All right, next up, request for qualification for urban design services to create and implement a city master plan.
Turn it over to Jenny Rowan, our Community Development Director.
Thank you. As you know, we're looking into redoing our city master plan. This is kind of the first step in that direction. So what you have in your packet here is the RFQ for the master plan. And so we really took this from the engineering RFQ that came before you before and altered it for the master plan. And we don't have any dates as of now. The calendar dates, I expect we'll be talking about that as well.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
On page 78, extensive experience in the field of planning, especially focused on the creation and implementation of master plans. Should we add of beach communities? It's kind of a special community.
I think that's a great suggestion.
it's,
We can do that.
Master plan in the center of Tampa would be a totally different concept.
There's some,
And rightfully so, the mayor does mention that in number 3, understanding unique challenges facing the barrier island is, but I just wanted to add that in. I did see that, but thank you, yeah, absolutely.
Make that clear. Yes, we can add that.
The experience sounds all great. How do we plan to advertise the RFQ? I want to make sure we
We have not
advertise
gotten that
sufficiently.
far, so I am
Yeah.
up to suggestions.
yeah,
Robin
we'll-
might know a little bit
so-
more. This is
So
really
we'll,
the first.
obviously it'll be posted on our website, it will go to the Demand Star. I think we will similarly send it to the American Planning Association that's loaded with planners and folks that work on overall master plans or specific master plans for neighborhoods and specific areas. And also probably to, even engineering firms and architectural firms. And Demand Star kind of covers all of those, but we'll send it to those other professional organizations just to get a
It
little
doesn't hurt
more.
to overdo it, so I'm
Yes.
just suggesting we brainstorm on that a little bit. I did have a another comment. I think it's important that, and maybe not in the RFQ piece of it, but as far as what they're actually their deliverables, I'd like to see them include a section on the history of Madeira Beach,
Yeah.
where we've come from, who we are, make sure they understand, that they've done the background to be able to present that, because a lot of people have been here for decades, but many other people have only been here for years. And they don't, they hear stories of the fishing village. We want to understand exactly what our history is and where we've been. We need to understand where we've been before we understand where we're going. And then my only other comment is an understanding of the beach economy. Where do we spend our money, on services? But where do we get our money? Where do we, through COVID, we had no tourism for a period of time. How did that impact us? And what would a state, what would we look like without tourism versus, how would it, you hear over and over again, we don't want to be another Clearwater Beach. You look, tourism, they're number one in tourism, but they're also number one in millage rates. So the residents there are not getting a break. So we need to understand where we want to go, but that beach economy is, I think, you have to understand it and be able to present it and talk about it so we can figure out where we want to go. It's not just elevations and structural pieces of the community, so how we want to get there.
And we
Just
can
my 2
include
cents.
that, I'm looking at the scope of work on page 77. That's something that we can include, the history and the beach economy, and go over that within that scope of work.
Yeah, just, like I say, we're
Make
just
sure
kind
that
of
we have
brainstorming,
that.
we're trying to develop something that's
Yeah.
inclusive, and, I think it'll go a long way. These are the things that go through my mind anyway, so.
Any other comments?
Okay.
Just very excited for this to come to
Yes,
fruition.
it is very exciting. And we'll include that in the RFQ as well, the comments.
So if this is step one, what's step two?
Step 2 would be advertising it, getting this out. We really need to sit down. Our team has really been focused on Johns Pass Village and the other issues that will be coming to you next month at the BOC workshop. So we really want to get that finished, and then we're planning on really focusing on this.
So if you had to guess, when do you think it might go out to bid?
December, January,
I think December,
yeah.
So we won't see anything until
February.
February, yeah. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If there's no other comments on that, we'll move forward to item J, Ford, Pinellas Alternative Compromise Johns Pass Village Activity Center Plan.
All right. I know that a lot of you have already seen similar presentations like this, so I'll try and get through them. So we'll be talking about the Johns Pass Village Activity Center and the alternative compromise that came from Ford Pinellas. So why do we have the Johns Pass Village Activity Center? Really is to protect the village, to make sure that we have compatible redevelopment in the area. We need to be consistent with the countywide plan, and we are being proactive instead of reactive in planning. So the relationship with the county and us locally, we've gone through this before, but it's very good to go over this again and make sure that we all understand it. So at the county level, we have the countywide plan. They have the rules, the strategy, the map. All of that's in the countywide plan. We really have the allowed uses and intensities and densities, and we get that from the county. Locally, we have two things. We have a comprehensive plan, and then we have our code of ordinances, which that's where you have your zoning, your land development regulations. So with the county, say if they have a density of 60 units per acre locally in our comprehensive plan and in our code of ordinances and our zoning, we could go with the 60 units per acre. We could go with something lower. We could go with 50 units per acre, but we cannot go higher. We cannot have a standard that's higher than the county. And so it's important to realize that every single parcel of land has 3 designations. We have a designation with the county, then we have a designation with our comprehensive plan, that's the future land use, and then we have one with our zoning. And all 3 of those really work together. We cannot have standards that are higher than the county. So in 2008, the city adopted inconsistent standards where we went higher than what the county allows. So we were notified in 2008 that there's inconsistencies. There's nothing that ever resolved that. So current staff, we realized the issue. We reached out to Fort Pinellas. We've been working back and forth with them. You'll see a lot of our other issues being resolved at our next BOC meeting. And then also this Johns Pass Village Activity Center, it's really resolving those issues back in 2008, cleaning it up, making sure that we are consistent with the county and through our comprehensive plan and our zoning. Bottom line, that's what we're trying to do. So what does that look like? So in the countywide plan, you can see with their land use, and then on the right side is our comprehensive plan and the coordinating categories. You can see that our numbers are higher than what the county allows. We can be the same or less restrictive, but we cannot be higher. So the intensity and density in certain areas are higher, and that's what you see on this slide. So up and down Gulf Boulevard, we're doing text changes to the land development regulations. That'll really fix that inconsistency. You'll see those next month for first reading. But looking at Johns Pass Village in this area on this slide, this is where we have the concentration of non-conforming properties, so or buildings where these exceed what the standards allow, and we can't just go in and do a text change. This requires something more unique that would be like a land use change. So that's why this area was picked for the activity center land use change. So just an example of what you could build here and how it doesn't really match the character of Johns Pass. So in C1, the land use, it allows for a 0.55 floor area ratio. And so if we input that onto this building, you can see that that would not be compatible with the character of that area. So we're really looking to resolve those issues, make sure that we're protecting Johns Pass, those areas that are non-conforming, as well as making sure that we have compatible redevelopment. So one of the questions we always get is why does the boundary go all the way up to 133rd? So as you can see in this slide, if you're looking south towards Johns Pass Village, you see Madeira Bay and Barefoot Beach Club, and those are larger developments, whereas if you're looking away north from the Village Activity Center, it really lowers down, you have more residential structures. So that's one of the reasons why that boundary goes to 133rd. And also looking at the master plan, the Johns Pass neighborhood center over here, the boundaries that in the master plan they really picked out, it went a lot further than 133rd. So we didn't feel that that was appropriate, and when we collected our data, and we really wanted to protect the residential areas, so we lowered that area. And then the third biggest reason why it goes to 133rd, you can see in this slide that there's inconsistencies with the future land use in what is currently developed. So if you take Madeira Bay Resort, we have residential medium over here. We also have rec open space, and this should not be rec open space. This is due to a utility easement, but it should not be a land use of rec open space, as well as on landward of the coastal construction control line, so everything that is east of this preservation area. There are buildings that are sitting here that also should not be the rec open space. So it's also cleaning up those areas. Andrew did an excellent job of going through every single property, looking at where they're built, how high they are, what is the density, what's the intensity. And Johns Fest Village is really the area that's concentrated with the most non-conforming properties. So we're really trying to capture what's there and then proposing that land use change. So at the county-wide level, this is what it would look like. We have our current existing countywide plan, future land use, and then you would just see the activity center. And this is the application that we submitted to Fort Pinellas. But then locally, as we all know, over here on 133rd looks very different than on Village Boulevard, which looks very different than Pelican Lane, which looks different than Boardwalk. So we created these character districts, and that would be really captured in our comprehensive plan and also in our zoning. So we submitted this application to Fort Pinellas. We've been working closely with them. They have a recommendation of an alternative compromise. So what that means is we submitted our application back in January with a community center level activity center. These are all the subcategories within the activity center. So we submitted it at the community center level, and they're saying that, yes, it should be an activity center, but we recommend that it's a neighborhood center. So they're lowering the standards from community center to neighborhood center. And some of the reasons why they're requesting this is the area size is 27 acres. It's on here. So you can see the acreage range 20 to 500, 50 to 500. So that's one of the reasons why they're asking it to be a neighborhood center, because it's not the 50 acres. The limited walkability, just within that area, it's not identified as an existing or planned activity center, and that neighborhood center is a less intense category. So these went to the PAC meeting as well as a Fort Pinellas board meeting. The PAC meeting is composed of planners throughout Pinellas County. Both meetings unanimously voted that they agreed with the alternative compromise. So what does that mean for us locally? So looking at the character districts, there's a few areas that we will have to reduce. They requested us to reduce the residential units per acre in the Johns Pass Resort to 18. And then we will have to reduce the FAR by the districts by right down to, so you can see here, that neighborhood center level. The maximum is 2.0. So all these numbers in red, we will need to reduce. And we also included on this slide, this is new, the average lot size per acre, just so you can see this, average lot size per character district, and then what that looks like for the temporary lodging, maximum units per acre. Now, there is one option that the county also talked to us about, is the alternative temporary lodging use standards. You've probably heard me talking about this before. We're going this route with up and down Gulf Boulevard, where we're reducing the density by right, but then we're also allowing for a way for people to get back up to what we currently allow, and that's through the alternative temporary lodging use standards. It's in the countywide plan, something that we can adopt, something that they adopted in 2008, but it wasn't written out clearly. So this alternative temporary lodging use standards, you have to get a development agreement. The development agreement must include these requirements to design standards, concurrency management standards, hurricane evacuation plans, and mobility management. And I would say it would be good for everyone to read through that development agreement standards, not tonight, but at some point before the next BOC meeting, just so you can really digest it. In your packet, it starts on page 146, and it really goes through what that development agreement has to include. And it's pretty strict. Like I said, it has design standards, concurrency management, hurricane evacuation, mobility. But I think the design standards will be really helpful, especially in Johns Pass Village. On page 148 of your packet, it really goes through those design considerations and what you can put in that development agreement. So this is one of the options that we could take going forward with the reduction that we have to do. We could have, with the floor area ratio and temporary lodging units per acre, we could use, where we have the asterisks, we could use the alternative temporary lodging use standards on this page, which would require that development agreement with all of those considerations put in place. So that's what staff would recommend doing, and we will come back to you with the reduction in these numbers and see what input you have tonight as well. And so where are we with Johns Pass Village Activity Center? It went to the PAC meeting. It also went to the Fort Pinellas Board. And so with that alternative compromise, it comes back to you at your next BOC meeting to vote yes or no on the alternative compromise. That's from the community center level subcategory of the activity center down to the neighborhood center subcategory. So if BOC agrees with that, then it will go to the CPA to vote on. From there, it'll go back to you to do the final review and adoption. And then we will be working with the zoning, and we are looking at dates in early November, mid-November, to do public workshops on the zoning, so that then we can start working on that once we know the numbers of the intensity, density that you would like to put forward.
In watching the planning commission, and then again, the term residential comes up quite a bit, and how you regulate residential versus commercial. What is a condo? Is that
Condo would
residential or
be-
is that
yeah,
commercial?
that would be residential. So We have residential and then we have rental, vacation rentals. And so those are the same density standards. So you'll see it in your next meeting, BOC meeting, that we're adopting like the vacation rental definition and all of those definitions which are consistent with the countywide plan. But you really count it the same, the vacation rentals and a residential. But then you have the temporary lodging, which is your hotel.
In the packet, I included a list, this was as of 2019, list of activity centers in Pinellas County based on their subcategories. So example of neighborhood centers include the 8th Avenue Commercial District in St. Pete Beach, which is a historic commercial district that has similar sized lots and buildings to Johns Pass. Downtown Historic Palm Harbor Master Plan, and then in Dunedin, the 375 Patricia Avenue,
Which page was that?
141.
141, and then Tarpon Springs, Mears Crossing Special Area Plan. So as you can see, these neighborhood center, it's a more restrictive category than community center, and these are, and at least with the St. Pete Beach one, it's pretty similar to a lot of the stuff down in Johns Pass.
And they're typically smaller as well.
But this category protects what's currently there and allows for some redevelopment, but that would be in the scale of what's currently been built down there. So it like fixes both issues. But did any of you guys watch the Ford Pinellas board meeting of this item? It'd be good to watch it because a lot of their board members had similar kind of questions and concerns. That's why they wanted to go with a more restrictive category, because they want to make sure that as a redevelopment, it's to scale of what currently exists. They don't want to overdevelop Johns Pass. So it was very reasonable compromise that staff definitely supports.
Is that video on their website?
It's on their,
Yes,
it's on their
website.
YouTube, I think.
They updated it, so it's on their website now. You can watch the video.
Great.
So I have just two questions. One is for them to come back and suggest that we do the neighborhood center as opposed to the community center, and they're using the acreage as the point. Why did we go in at the community center instead of the neighborhood center? And it doesn't appear that they really hold fast to that number, because.
They don't.
And then my follow-up question to that is, if we do what they're suggesting, which it appears that's really what we have to do, if there was a catastrophic event in Johns Pass, under the neighborhood center, would Johns Pass be able to be rebuilt as it is?
Yes,
Okay.
it would.
But currently, if we had a catastrophic event, we could not build Johns Pass back as it sits now.
That's correct.
Okay.
So even this neighborhood center category really does cover everything
it.
that's there.
Okay.
If you look at page 143, that acreage threshold, we discussed this with Linda and Dave earlier when we were writing through the plan of if we could apply for that community center level. You can, but as you saw in that list, there are other activity centers that are lower than 50 acres that are in that community center category.
What I got out of it, when I read everything, we could go with the community center if that's what we wanted, but it would open us to litigation. Did I read that right? That if we pressed it and we went against what the recommendation was, that there was
I mean, they would vote it down and we wouldn't get it at all. This is basically their way to offer a compromise so we don't have to restart the process all over again.
And they agree that it should be an activity center, that it's unique, it needs to be protected. They're just saying, well, it should be a neighborhood center.
Makes sense. Thank you.
You guys are burning the midnight oil. You have to be putting a lot of work in this.
Yes, yes, we do.
That's appreciated.
Yeah. You have anything? Please come up, sir.
Dave Hudson, 15308 Harbor Drive, and this is a procedural question which you guys don't have to answer, but I hope you will. The activity, Johns Pass Activity Center passed a year ago in the first reading. If you bring it back in October, November, whenever, is that a second reading and it clears, or has there been enough changes that it would go back to a first and a second reading to pass?
It should be a second reading because Fort Pinellas has reviewed it, the state's reviewed it. Once it goes through there at the county commission meeting, it would come back for second reading.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments? Well, time is 8:46. Unless anybody's got anything else, this meeting's adjourned.